the way that the fellowship is set up is that it's very clear where my loyalty lies, which is with the interests of my ministry.
Hugely changed me personally. I mean, it was life-changing for sure.
It's been a privilege to be the first fellow here in Uzbekistan, and the last 6 months has been truly rewarding.
This is the most concentrated learning environment you'll ever be in.
I've learned so much since I've been here about the culture, about the food, the history. I've learned that Pakistanis have a real talent for friendship, which they cement through endless cups of chai.
In the new Africa, one more independent country, the state of Uganda. At Entebbe Airport, Prime Minister...
The ODI Fellowship Scheme was set up in the early 60s. That was a period that the UN defined as the decade of development. It was a time where so many countries in Africa were becoming independent. It was the end of the process of colonization, and it was felt it was really important to support countries in the decolonization process to build robust institutions. And that was particularly supporting them through strengthening their public financial management, having economies that could support the institutions become strong and robust for the post-independence era.
What is clear is that when you look at Vanuatu, it is a remarkably successful country. And that's because it has been able to deliver on very, very difficult reforms. And I think the ODI Fellows have played a critical part in that. Fellows, they don't come as the designers of change, they come as the implementers. So whereas a lot of consultants will come with a solution, no fellow that I know has ever come with a solution. They're just here to help. And I think that's the biggest difference.
Fellows were involved in strengthening the domestic resource mobilisation strategy of Liberia. They helped to improve inflation and GDP forecasting models for the Central Bank of Papua New Guinea and designed key national health accounts and client satisfaction surveys in Tanzania.
ODI has over the years and continues to provide very highly skilled people with the right attitude. And what we've seen is that the relationship has really been very good. We have had fellows chosen because they usually give us a list of fellows with the qualifications and their experiences, and we pick those ones that we know will give us the right assistance. And they have really been working. The cooperation has been very good between the fellows and the staff they have worked with, and the results have really been amazing.
ODI Fellows developed strategies for agricultural development in Mozambique and Malawi and drafted a report that guided the World Bank's maritime transportation investments in the Pacific Islands.
I remember at one point the Minister of Finance in Zambia said, look, the IMF mission's coming. Can you hold them out there for an hour and talk about the macro framework by yourself, because we're trying to posture right now. I was like, but they trust you to do that. And somehow I think, it's on you to find the courage to do it. And when you do, and you're able to kind of achieve those challenges that are set to you, the trust that's given to you, and you feel like you can deliver, it's like magic. It's a feeling of adrenaline, and it's a feeling of magic that I don't think I've ever felt ever since the fellowship.
Fellows develop technical training materials for colleagues, civil servants and MPs in Vanuatu, and have conducted informal training of colleagues in many countries in everything from fiscal analysis to building macroeconomic models.
I think the general feeling about development was changing. There had been the kind of euphoria and enthusiasm of newly independent countries being launched with great optimism, Ghana some years before, but then the East African countries. I had a sort of fairly low-level job in the Treasury. The Treasury is an immensely prestigious department in every country, but I was a fairly low-level functionary. And I was fairly quickly put in my place, as is appropriate. I think my first job when I got in the department was feeding the parking meter for the permanent secretary when we were offered a meeting. So it was very, very clear I was there to carry the bags, and for a while at least until I learnt the job.
These two projects, at least the transformation and the digital transformation, are at the heart of where RDB envisioned itself to be in the next 5 to 10 years. So being part of having her experience and her knowledge really helped fast track this process for us and bring in a different point of view. And also the ability for all the ODI fellows to adapt to the culture, to the way the public institutions work in Rwanda, is also, it's been such a big value for us as RDB.
ODI Fellows co-authored a World Trade Organization trade facilitation agreement in Malawi, modelled different scenarios to inform free trade negotiations in Ghana, and contributed to the passing of the Made in Rwanda policy.
As a fellow, you come with skills but no assumptions. And so everything that you're presented with, you'll generally view it with fresh eyes. The best programs in development are the ones which have a small footprint but a huge impact. And I think the ODI Fellowship absolutely falls into that category.
Depending on what's happening globally, at one point trade became quite a big area because a lot of countries were looking for WTO accession. So ODIs were requested to work on trade issues. Recently, climate and environmental economics, and I think going forward now the next stage for that will be more about green financing.
Our fellows contributed to national climate adaptation plans in Fiji and Vanuatu, and conducted a comprehensive review of biodiversity expenditure in Namibia.
It wasn't necessarily a kind of almost like seen as a sort of transfer of clever people from richer countries to poorer countries, but actually just promoting sort of the exchange of ideas and experiences across civil services around the world. When I was a ODI fellow in Malawi, my boss was the budget director, and he would call the shots and I would work for him. He was my boss. And I've done a few jobs in development since where we might like to pretend the same thing, but actually I always knew that my boss was really the person that was paying me, whether that was the World Bank or the UN. And so I think that's quite sort of fundamental to the scheme, this idea that you are a civil servant, you are being led by the civil service, you work for government. I think that's what makes it special.
In Fiji, fellows supported the redesign of the country's merger control regime and helped draft the National Competition and Consumer Protection Policy. They initiated and moderated discussions from the President of Uzbekistan's visit to Singapore and were instrumental in launching an economic research centre in Sierra Leone.
It's no longer British. The great thing is now ODI fellows from all over the world. I was in Uzbekistan recently, and we have a fellow from Germany there and one from Singapore. This is great. This shows that other countries have got lots to offer, not just the UK. I don't think I'd make the cut now as an ODI fellow. You need to have at least a master's, certainly, but you need to have some specialisms. And so, in a way, it's a success of the countries that their demands on what ODI should be providing have changed. It's no longer the traditional ODI Fellowship Scheme that I joined, I guess, some 42 years ago.
But the fellowship scheme is part of ODI's DNA. This is how we connect with a lot of the governments we work with. These are the contexts in which we do research. These are the governments we tend to influence, and the fellowship allows us to have the relationship of trust that really makes us the partners of choice for so many governments, particularly in low and middle income countries.
60 years ago, it was undergraduates from Oxford and Cambridge who were put in placements in various host institutions all over the world. Now, it's a global program. You have, in this year's recruitment cycle, we had 80 nationalities represented in our 640 candidates. you're seeing a real diversity, not just gender diversity, racial diversity, ethnic diversity, representation from the LGBTQI community. The fellows look like our world, and that's really important.